Welcome, crafties, to another edition of the Arena Craft podcast, a show dedicated exclusively to Magic the Gathering Arena. My name is Arjuna. I'm one of your hosts. And what is this I catch on the breeze? A faint waft of aroma. Jasmine, perhaps, or peonies, or is it even lotus blossom? I know not, but it is a floral scent. Perhaps this heralds the arrival of one of D&D's most sought out deities. It is the dragon god himself, Bahamut, the Grand Master of Flowers. Covert Go Blue, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, buddy?
Was Covert Go Blue always the Grand Master of Flowers, or was like has this been a development? Like I'm Batman? Like you never saw CGB and the Grandmaster of Flowers in the same room together. It's just a fact.
I mean, I'm just saying, man, there was some, when the dude takes off his glasses and it's like, whoa, he was Superman all along, right?
So now you can't not see it, is what you're telling me after you made that joke.
That's what I'm saying. I I looked at you different and here we are, man.
Dude, a YouTube channel, and they also posted this on Twitter, so check out our Twitters. Dragonstorm Studios did a fan art drawing of me as the Grandmaster of Flowers, and now it's over. You've destroyed my career. Done. I think I should sue someone.
In one episode, I destroyed a white legendary dragon, and I discovered another one. I mean, it was a good time, man. It was a good time. But anyway, yeah, go check out that channel. Check out the art. It's epic. I also loved how they managed to work a couple Yorians into it as well. Just for the branding.
I feel like that was done just to pacify me a little.
Just to kind of,
how could I hate it?
Keep the god's wrath at bay, right?
How could I be angry at Yorian? How?
So yes, we have been adventuring widely in the Forgotten Realms. This past week, we promised you that we'd be doing an overview of the format, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing this week. And I don't know, man. It's like, so CGB, I want to ask you, like, what have you been playing? What have you been getting up to over this past week? But I kind of feel like we're going to spend the entire episode talking about that.
We are.
So I don't know. So we do want to talk about the format. I kind of want to dive in.
Yes.
But I think we can't help but first mention the fact that there has already been a banning in Standard 2022. We didn't even get 1 week in, man, and they've already banned some broken combo. Maybe it slipped by R&D. Maybe it was a plan all along. I don't know. But what do you think about this book banning?
They banned the Book of Exalted Deeds because you can put the counter on Faceless Haven and create a situation where nobody can win the game and no one can lose the game. Platinum Angel is like a beloved card by sickos who like prison style effects and the nonsense that it just kind of breaks. It's another one of these cards that takes the rules and breaks the rules. I mean, it says in the freaking rule book, a player loses the game. They used to come. I played Magic when the starter deck came with the little rule book. Do you know what I'm talking about? Look them up on eBay.
Yeah, I do remember. Yeah, this is classic books.
They actually sell those on eBay now, those little paper books. And it says in there that you lose the game when you fall to 0 life or when you cannot draw a card from your deck. And then we make cards that break the rules. And it's one of the cool things about Magic is that they always kind of had that ability to break the rules. But I don't like, this is kind of a silly way to do it. And the idea that if two people, we talked about this on the show last week, I believe, if two people both have the combo, then it becomes an endurance test. Like who has mom or wife or husband bringing food into the basement so that who has the largest bottle under their desk to make sure that they can continue just clicking every single turn until the other gives in. And I guess Wizards just took a look at that and was like, nah, we banned Nexus from Best of One. We're going to get rid of Book. But do you find it weird that they got rid of Book from Standard 2022 only, but not from Best of One?
Yeah, I do think that that is a little odd. I wonder if they just thought that it's a much narrower format and a weaker power level format, and that's why they
True
did
and
it.
true.
Because I mean, it's like Embercleave don't really care about your book Faceless Haven combo, right? So and like same with Rogues, it's like you're not going to slip that one past Rogues, I don't think. So I think that it's okay. And I even if they hadn't banned it, to be honest, I would have just put it into the like Tybalt's trickery category and just kind of moved on. So for me, I don't have much of an opinion either way. I'm kind of cool with it. I'm cool with it out. I didn't play against it once in the queue, and I wasn't expecting to really.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel mostly indifferent on this topic. Yeah.
Okay. There's something that I felt kind of like meh at first. And as time has gone by, I've been getting angrier and angrier. They didn't give any wild cards.
Yeah, this was a sticking point for you.
It wasn't at first. I was like, okay, I'm not that surprised because it really only is banned from this one queue. The more I thought about it, the more it's like, wait a minute. You guys created this queue that is pretty hype. We're both hyped about it.
Mm-hmm.
You created these cards and released them for a week. And like people, like who's to say that people didn't get excited about this prison kind of combo and craft it and try it out? I streamed it. I made a video with it. A lot of other people did, with the kind of thing that you can play it in this queue that's going to be around for a few weeks. And then to just ban it from that queue, say you get nothing and say, well, you can go play it in standard, but good luck with that. It's like, no, you made this queue and you made these cards and you said these cards were legal for this queue and I want to play this queue. And it's not like it was even taking over the meta. So what about the people who just crafted it because they wanted to play the life gain deck? Like, the longer I've thought about it, the longer I think that that is just a really bad move. Why? Who are they to tell you, hey, you don't you don't get it in this queue, but we're not giving you wild cards, so just go play something else. No, like you made the game, you made the queue. I want to play the queue. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think there's a certain validity to that. Maybe I'm just someone who didn't personally get burned by it, so I don't care that much. I can see the logic of being like, there are many, many formats of Magic, and this is the only place you can't play it. I think it stings a little bit more to know that this was maybe like the only queue where it was actually a competitive thing to do, right? This is the only queue where you had a reasonable chance of pulling it off consistently. So I think that that does kind of lend to the feels bad a little bit. I think that sometimes people get a little overzealous and like clamoring for wildcard reimbursements. They're like, well, they banned it from standard, I should get my wild cards there. And then if they ban it in historic, you know what, Wizards, I want my wild cards there too. And if you ban it in my best of one standard 2022 queue, guess what, Wizards, you're giving me wild cards again. And I think at some point I can understand Wizards being like, nah, bro, just kind of get over it.
Yeah, that's where I was. That is exactly where I was before, because I agree with you on all of that. But
yeah,
the longer I've sat with it, the more I think this is different.
Well, and I see why this feels different. And also so here's the other side of it, right? It doesn't cost much to generate goodwill, right? Just give people their wild cards back. Don't worry, Wizards. They'll spend those mythic wildcards on something else. They'll keep playing your game. It's just like it's kind of like, be generous, right?
Yeah,
be generous. It really costs them nothing, in my opinion.
Why you hate us, Wizards? Why?
Yeah,
why?
Dude. Just be kind to us. We love your game. We just want any amount of kindness, and we'll keep playing your game. So I mean, when you put it like that, it's kind of like, come on, bro, just pony over, Anyway.
Agreed.
Well, so that happened. I mean, we almost wonder if Wizards just wants us to hate them now, right? They're like, ooh, what if we did this?
I found an amazing amount of power in just being the hateable one. Like, I really did. Maybe that's where Wizards is at. Maybe they've got some evil Wizards of the Coast running things now. They tried to be the good guy. They got attacked for it. And now we're the villain. It's what it is.
Yeah. It's like, Imagine if every time Gandalf showed up in the Shire, they just had like a million complaints for him, you know? They were just like, Gandalf, you took too long. Gandalf, this format sucks.
Gandalf,
Gandalf,
you're late.
you're late. That spell you cast was too powerful. None of the rest of us can keep up. And he was, Gandalf was just like, all right, screw it. I'm moving into the White Tower. I'm teaming up with Sauron. Let's go. Plebs. Right?
Yep.
So anyway. Okay, so that happened, but meanwhile, the rest of us Middle Earthers, the rest of us Forgotten Realmers were busy churning away in the queue, just going to town with whatever particular archetype we felt like exploring. And Covert Blue, I don't know about you, but I've been playing a lot of different decks in the queue this past week, and it's been really sweet. I think this format is really fun. It's also funny because I've been in Mythic, I've been in Numbered Mythic, and I kind of expected at some point to hit that place where it was just like all mono green, right? Or oops, all dragons, or oops, all Dimir control. And I've been shocked by like how much memeing there is still on the ladder. Like I was trying to do some research, right? I wanted to just like really get clear on the meta game and whatever. And, I played for like 4 hours last night, and I would say 60% of my matches were just like Hofry, Ghost Forge, meme decks and stuff like that. So
what?
I don't know. I don't know if that's been your experience as well.
No. What
maybe I need
playing?
Maybe I need to climb higher on the ladder to get to that like super sweaty pocket.
I mean, if you're a Numbered Mythic, you don't go much higher. Like
that's what I was thinking, right?
I think that the matchmaker like kind of identifies what you're running and tries to pair you up against something similar, and sometimes that creates weird matchups. But I mean, I am curious about what you were running, so I guess we have to get to that to maybe try to get to the bottom of how you find the memers in Mythic.
Sure. I mean, admittedly, I wasn't running probably the most competitive deck. I was trying out a Naya Brew. It was just your classic kind of take the standard list, cut out all of the good cards we can't play, try to make the mana base work, try to still play the good cards which we can play, and go from there.
Like Naya Adventures? With no adventures?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like Naya Adventures without the adventures,
Ventures aren't the same as adventures.
I mean, what's the difference? It's one consonant, right?
Okay.
Well, we got there eventually.
Nice.
But gold spend, like turn 3 gold spend dragon feels pretty good. And Showdown of the Skalds is still a powerful magic card. And so, we were just trying to kind of jam with that stuff and ramp out some powerful cards and put a bunch of tokens on the docks and go from there, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So this brings me to I don't know, man. I think maybe we should. Do you want to just make some broad observations of the format first, and then we can get more specifically into the decks?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this brings me to my first observation of the format, which I think should be fairly obvious if you start playing it. But just to be perfectly clear, it's really, really hard to play more than 2 colors in this format. And I think that most of the decks that are playing a third color are like really treasure heavy, right? That kind of like maybe like a Rakdos treasure list, which is splashing a third color, or maybe some kind of green based list, which is maybe you're using your innkeepers to, like in my Naya list, for example, I was kind of splashing red.
Prosperous innkeeper, by the way, to the traumatized.
Yes, clarify on which innkeeper we're talking about. The Middle Earth innkeeper, as it were, the Hobbit innkeeper. So that's the first place to start. And I think that one of the biggest tensions that I have thus far discovered in this format is, if I'm building any kind of a list that has a chance of being monocolored, like why would I want to play 2 colors when I could just go monocolor and play Faceless Haven? Because I think Faceless Haven has definitely proven itself to be one of the absolute best cards in the format. It's the kind of card that is worth completely warping your deck around because it really is that good. So I don't know. These are some of my musings on the mana basis, because I think that's really important. What are you thinking about that?
So I think that you can play 3 colors, but it's like like you said, you use the treasures to kind of splash a color. So, for example, I don't think it's very wise to play a deck that has the Desert Doom, which is double blue, and Liliana, which is double black, Professor Onyx, that is, and Doomscar, which is double white. Like, you're just asking for pain, misery, sadness. It's so awkward. Or you're just asking for every single land you play to enter the battlefield tapped if you're going to try to get away with it that way. I have seen some pretty cool stuff, both watching and playing myself, with like, you play a treasure-ish shell with Prosperous Innkeeper or the artist. What's it called? Yeah. Say it again.
Kalane,
yeah.
Kalane something artist.
Kalane, I want to say Blood Artist, but it's not Blood Artist because Blood Artist is
something
Blood
like
Artist.
that, right?
It's a painter, something painter. Nasty
Maybe.
Painter.
Blood Painter. Anyway.
Treasure Painter. Anyway. Kalane is a good one. Prosperous Innkeeper is a good one. The Shambling Ghast is there. It's kind of an option. Magda is a really good one. Jaspera Sentinel is really good with all these cards that we mentioned. And so you can play, like, your 2 colors have to revolve around these early drops. So like if you're green and red, you play like Magda and the Sentinel. If you're black and red, you play the Painter and the Magda and the Shambling Ghast maybe, and then you're like you can splash 1 card that uses like 1 or 2 mana of any color off of these treasures. So like you can just randomly have Alrund's Epiphany as your top end in this deck, or Coma that didn't have to be there, or you can play Showdown of the Skalds in a deck like this where you're just going to use your treasure or your Jaspera Sentinel to make the mana, and maybe you throw in some pathways and no basics. But it's kind of weird that we live in a world where your 3-color deck is really a 2-color deck with rando splash 1 card. But that is actually important, because a lot of the 2-color decks, when you play them, they're missing something.
Yep,
they're just a card short, because it's such a small format, and some of the cards are really good, and then there's like a gap, right? And you don't want too many cards that fall into the gap, or you're just playing a hand with Eye Twitch and Shambling Ghast and some bad cards. You're just playing a weak deck.
Draft commons, right?
But you slot in a Showdown of the Skalds that just kind of comes from having some free treasure mana, and all of a sudden, like, your deck is powerful, just like that. So it's a big deal.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. So yeah, it's mana bases are super important, and I think that this highlights that we've been kind of getting away with it in Standard for a while. I wouldn't say that the mana in Standard was perfect. Like, we lost Shocklands, for example. That was a really big loss. The triomes were limited to only 5 of the 10 possible combinations. So, it's not like the mana was great. But I still felt like they were good enough. You could just draft up a deck and just kind of throw in all the lands you'd expect to play and say, good enough. And it was like kind of okay, right?
Pathways and Fabled Passage got a lot done. Like, they really did.
They went a long way, right?
Yeah.
They went a long way. And in this format, like, I find, like, I feel like I'm up at night sweating thinking of my mana bases in this format, because it's hard, dude. It is really hard to put together a functional mana base. You really have to look at the cards you want to play. If you want to play Faceless Haven in a 2-color deck, you got to really think about it, man, because those tapped snow duels are just awful. They are awful, awful Magic cards. And so whatever you're doing has to be really worth it. So that's kind of the first thing that I want to comment on here, is that I really think that one of the skill ceilings of the format is mana bases. And I think that you should probably spend more time thinking about your mana bases than you ordinarily would.
And that makes me want to lean into the creature lands a bit.
Go for it.
Pretty much all of the creature lands are really good, because they just give you this ability to keep attacking every turn of the game, like at all times, which makes it really hard for control to even exist, though it can, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But they all have a cost. Like Faceless Hate. None of this is free. Faceless Haven, any of the creature lands, whatever colors you're in, like, all of these come with a cost, and the numbers aren't clear. Are you supposed to just run 4 Havens and 4 Layer of the Hydras in mono green? I mean, maybe, probably not. I certainly have, but I've also been got by the mana base. Are you supposed to run like 2 and 2? I've had a lot of spots where I didn't have a creature land and I really needed one. So yeah, like there's a lot of cost benefit analysis, and it's the kind of conversations that I just have trouble having with my YouTube audience, because in a comment, why no ... It's like, well, that's a really freaking complicated question in this case, because in the past it was just kind of free to throw in a creature land here if it was in your colors. And here it is like your curve is important. Your snows are important. Your colors are hard. Everything about the mana base is a lot more difficult than normal. So the best advice I have is to spend a lot of time working on your mana base, or copy somebody who makes good ones.
Yes. Both time-tested approaches. Even if someone's playing the same color combo as you, and the deck even has kind of a different plan, you can still just learn a lot about looking at their mana base, right? Just, it's like, what's Paulo Vitor Damaderosa doing? What's Brad Nelson doing? They're probably good people to, even if your deck's a little different, just freaking swipe the mana base. It'll probably be fine. So yeah. And the last thing I want to say about that is that one of the reasons it's important is that some of the reasons you could be a little bit lazy with your mana bases in more powerful formats sometimes is that sometimes you have like a turn 4 play that just kind of ends the game, or you have a turn 6 play that ends the game. So you can get away with maybe like having a bad turn or taking a turn off when you're pretty much reliably going to cast Emergent Ultimatum and win the game on turn whatever. In this format, you don't have that luxury. There are very few like super powerful game ending things you can do. And so what you play every turn really, really, really matters. It's also a very fast and very aggressive format. So taking a turn off can just really, really punish you in this format. And unless you're playing cards like Alrund's Epiphany, it can be really hard to catch up. So yeah, go ahead.
You think it's a fast and aggressive format, huh?
I mean, that has been my observation.
I'm excited to get into this, and we should probably start, when we move into specific decks and the polls of the format. I'm sure we should start with aggro, but I'll just tease for the future that I'm not sure it's going to stay that way.
Yeah, perhaps not. Perhaps not. Okay, so yeah, let's start talking about that. I mean, definitely week 1, of course, people like to get aggressive. It's just kind of an easy way to break into a meta you're not really sure about. Just have a solid game plan, be very proactive. If you're not really sure what you need to play around, just pick the best creatures in your color and jam them.
Or if you just like winning a lot and everybody else is figuring out that mana bases are hard to build and you can just farm them with mono color, you can go that route.
Indeed. So my discovery so far in this format is that I think that there are a number of good mono-colored decks, but I think that by far the best one is still mono green.
I agree.
I think that has, out of all of the things that people have experimented with, I think mono green has stood the test of time in this format so far. I mean, it hasn't been that much time, but I think that this deck it's really strong. It's a problem. You got to be ready for it. It's just a very, very good deck. What are you thinking about mono green right now?
It's by far the most played in like the matches that I've played, and by a lot. We're talking closing in some days on over 20% of the meta, it seems like. And nothing else I think is over 10. So that's a lot. And I think it's the most generic go-to if you are trying to brew and it's not going well for you and you feel like you want to rebuild your rank or stop with the nonsense and get some wins. Like going to mono green usually does the job when you come up against a brew, because it's very, very hard to tune a deck around beating mono green. And I think people are working on it, and I think it's going to work out. I don't think mono green is a broken deck. I think it's very hard to stop, and I think it's the easiest thing to turn to when you want that dopamine rush of victory in a best of 1 queue. So
indeed.
Yeah, mono green is a really good deck. I'm still not sure about, it's crazy, but I'm still not sure what the right configuration of lands is. with the Hydras and the Havens. I'm also got about 4 spots in the deck I'm not sure about. A lot of people are running Tangled Florahedrons and just saying, hey, if I make a land drop every turn, I'll probably win, or if I make enough mana, I'll probably win. But I've been having a lot more success with a card you talked about last week, the Ooze, the Ornery Ooze. And I'm also really wanting to get some like Battle Mammoth action, because I found that there are a lot of decks that just have trouble killing something big.
So I'm really, really glad that you're bringing this up, because I think that this is the current break point in building mono green is, do I want to go really stompy or do I want to go kind of rampy? And so on one end of the format, you have like, there was this list that Croquis built like in like day 1 or day 2, perhaps like the very most early part of the format, which I'm pretty sure was for Jaspera Sentinel, for Tangled Florahedron list. So Croquis obviously thinking that just powering out a board, like a huge board presence on turns, maybe 3, 4, 5, was just going to be like an insurmountable way to beat the format. So that was definitely one philosophy on mono green. Personally, I've played a lot of mono green, and some things change, some things don't, in my opinion. And I've never been a huge fan of running mana dorks in mono green, because this is kind of what I've found. Okay, playing a Seeker's Chariot on turn 3, yeah, that can be pretty strong. But you know what else is pretty strong is just like playing a 3/3 on turn 2 and then playing an Old Growth Troll on turn 3. And then, you know, it's like if you just put a threat on the board every single turn, like I think the theory for me is that mono green tends to win on like turn 5 or even on turn 4, just kind of by default. Your opponent just looks at what's going on and they're like, I'm never going to stop that train. So personally, I have also been having more success by just trying to basically put like a must kill threat on the board every single turn of the game and just smashing face every single turn of the game. I've also, in my games against mono green, you know, I've been playing all kinds of random decks, and I have also found that sometimes mono green stalls out super hard when their opening hand is something like 2 Jaspera Sentinels, you know, maybe like the what's that one drop that comes in with a counter?
The one drop that comes in with a counter is Swarm Shambler.
Swarm Shambler, exactly. So they have like maybe one of those. They have an Seeker's Chariot and then a couple lands. And like, it's like if your one boom boom in your ramp hand gets countered or dealt with, then you're left with just like a bunch of dorks on the field. And I've found it very, very easy to win games where my opponents just drew too many dorks and didn't draw enough boom booms. And especially when they were like building a board presence of dorks in the early turns of the game, and I was building a board presence of really relevant threatening creatures, sometimes you can just put mono green on the back foot. So these are kind of my observations so far. What have you been finding in that head-to-head between the rampy version and the stompy version?
At risk of going into becoming a mono green show, but yeah, I do have some things I'll try to hit on quickly. So in the aggro versus aggro mirrors, it's typically creature sizing and like card advantage that comes with creature sizing that decides them, not necessarily who makes the most mana. So I think that with green being the most popular deck, it makes a lot more sense to get into a version that can make the bigger creatures. I think that matters a lot. So I like going the way of like the ooze and the battle mammoth, and maybe even the new ooze, the jelly that you can just pump X into.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of a grindy jelly card for aggro. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really good if you have a lot of ways, not just ranger class, but plenty of ways to put +1/+1 counters on things too. Yeah. So, like I've been running Inscription of Abundance because I want more Blizzard Brawls, and that card has been impressive in the large creature mono green. It just has been a blowout very often.
Blizzard Brawl is savage, easy 4 of, and I totally agree. In my list, I was also looking for ways to try to get more fight spells in. So, yep.
Yeah, I would say that the ramp version is more likely to run all the creature lands, like 4 Lair of the Hydra, 4 Haven. Makes sense. And that's what Croquis did, because you always need that mana sink once you get cooking. And if you can just keep powering up large creature lands and attacking every turn, you can probably win. Whereas the ramp version needs to curve. It needs like double green into triple green into.
Do you mean the Stompy version?
Oh, yes, I do. My bad. The Stompy version needs to curve, so it's more likely to run like three or four Lair of the Hydras, no Havens, maybe one, because you need double green, triple green, and then you need 4 mana to play something else. And you just got to be dropping the bombs all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's my version. It's actually interesting that we're talking about the lands, because my version was maybe greedy. I was playing Stompy and I was running 4 Faceless Havens and 1 Lair of the Hydra. Personally, it worked out okay. It's possible that I was just getting lucky. I did have some games where it ended up being an issue, but I usually found that, I was able to keep curving by maybe playing out my my Mammoth land. I'm so
Kazandu Mammoth. Names,
I got you. Kazandu Mammoth. Yep. So like maybe I'd play a Kazandu Mammoth instead of the Ogre or the Troll, and maybe it wasn't the optimal thing I could have played on that turn, but it still kind of worked out enough of the time. But it's true that maybe if I went back and was a real grown up about my mana base, I might switch to something like a 2-2 split, or in the very least, maybe a 3-2 split. Just a way to kind of mitigate that problem. So that's definitely something for grown-ups to think about. A card that I ended up being quite impressed with was the Gnarly Professor.
Oh, yeah.
So I was looking for a curve topper, and again, because you're not ramping in the list that I'm running, I was kind of fine with my curve topping out at 4. And one of the things that I like about the Gnarly Professor is that it's in a very good break point in the format. It's something that you can attack into an Imrith, which I like. It's something that dodges all of the removal, which the black-based, the Dimir control decks, it dodges the sweepers that the control decks play.
Crippling Fear, Shadow's Verdict.
Yep, it's too big for the -3/-3. It's also too big for the Verdict. So I really like that about it. And then even if your opponent does get a Soul Shatter off on you or something, you still got some value out of the card. So I've been happy running 2 Gnarly Professors at the top end of my curve and just kind of calling it good. So has the Battle Mammoth been working out for you?
I think that a Gnarly Professor is really good too. I think it's like 2 Mammoth, and I wouldn't even craft them if you don't have the Mythics, because I don't think it's that much better. I think it's like 3 or 4 Gnarly Professors, 2 Mammoth in that version, something like that. And you want the Chariots too. You just need a lot of Chariots, sweet 4-drops. Chariot is legendary though, so maybe it's a 3. What do you fetch?
Yeah, okay, so I have actually often been fetching, it depends on the mana. If I'm flooding, I might go for the Mascot Exhibition if it feels like I actually have a chance of casting that. Most of the time, I don't get that far with my mana. I have actually really, really been enjoying the Anatomy. What is it? Expanded Anatomy?
That's what I was hoping for, yeah.
Okay, that card is surprisingly gas in this format, and not just in mono green. I think in any creature deck looking to turn sideways, I think it's been very solid in mono white running Professor of Symbology. I think that card is surprisingly good, and it's actually a really good combo with the Gnarly Professor. Like, I've found that, especially like in mono green mirrors, if you can be the person swinging with a 7/6 Trampler the following turn, like that can really put a lot of pressure on your opponent. So that's one of my main grabs with that.
In my blue control decks with Divide by 0 and no creatures other than Imrith, I take Expanded Anatomy pretty often.
Yes.
Vigilance on that thing is amazing.
Yep. Yeah, freaking crack for 7 with your Imrith and then have it on blocks. Let's go.
If you had told me Expanded Anatomy was a card I'd be putting in my learn boards, I'd have just probably thrown up. Dismissed it instantly, but it's true. I'm fetching that card all the time, almost always with mono green too, almost always.
Yeah, because at that mid stage of the game, I think often there is only 2 real things that you're considering. One is, can I get out Mascot Exhibition? If so, it's probably the best thing to fetch. But if not, you're just usually looking for ways to make your board better, right? You usually don't need to be ramping in the late stages of the game. And a lot of the other lessons come with pretty sizable downsides. So, like for example, a card that I have found extremely underwhelming in this format is the white one that exiles and gives your opponent a 3/2.
Yeah.
That I've found that card to be a trap. I think you'll often end up actually dying to the 3/2.
Reduced to memory. That's the name of it.
Yeah, reduced to memory, right? Usually the thing that you get rid of is a creature or something else that was threatening, and giving your opponent another threat. It's just not good news unless you have your perfect little, like, reduce followed by verdict turn or something. So yeah, anyway, those are the two. I think the three lessons that I have played the most consistently are obviously the sciences. What is it? Natural sciences.
Environmental sciences.
Environmental sciences, of course, because you do need to hit your land drops. And the mana sucks in this format, so it's important to have that. Even in your like mono white deck, sometimes you just need to hit your land drops.
Yep.
So environmental sciences is big, mascot exhibition, and the anatomy. Those are the three ones that I consistently run in pretty much all of my decks.
Yeah, when I get to the control decks, I'll have some more things to say about learn boarding, but learning is apparently for everyone. It's fundamental. Learning is fundamental in this format, and I think just about every deck is trying to find a way to crowbar it in a little bit, if it can go with their strategy at all.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, Gnarly Professor, definitely the best learn card in green. So we started talking about white a little bit. Why don't we hit on the white aggro decks before we move along here? Because I do think that white is the second best monocolor aggro deck in the format. One of the reasons for that is just that it's one of the decks that keeps the most from regular standard. There's a surprising amount of like very, very, okay, CGB's shaking his head. He's not sure about that.
Go on.
But I just think like if you go down the list, we just have a lot of very, very powerful and already very proven standard playable cards. We've got the I remember the name of it up until now. The 2/2 that puts counters on stuff.
Yeah, it's the Luminarch Aspirant. Yeah.
So we got Luminarch Aspirant. We have a bevy of I don't know, man.
I don't know why I say aspirant, but I do.
The aspirant. Okay,
it's a content play. We'll call it a content play.
That's a bold move. But we've got Apparition, we've got Spellbinder, we've got Redain, and that's just talking about the ones that already saw play. We have additional fairly playable white 3-drops as well. So and then of course Maul of the Skyclaves, one of my favorite cards that I've been running in my mono white aggro list that's been doing pretty well. So yeah, I mean, I think mono white's kind of a natural place to go. I think one of my biggest issues with these mono white lists has been filling in the cheap part of the curve, because we don't have good like doggos and stuff like that to be doing. We do very fortunately have one extremely playable white 1-drop, which is the 2/1 spirit that makes spirits.
Usher of the Fallen.
Usher of the Fallen. So that's a very solid include there. I have actually also been playing a couple copies of the Monk of the Open Palm, Open Hand, and with no Master of Flowers, because because my version is a Clarion Spirit version, and you just need enough 1-drops to fuel that card.
Okay.
So CGB is looking skeptical. I'm
sitting over here. Basically, I've got a Saw It Coming foretold. I'm just waiting to play it.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I'm not claiming that this is necessarily like the best deck to be playing in the format, but I think trying to crack mono white in standard 2022 is one of the most fun challenges. I think this is a deck that there are just so many different things that you can play and so many ways you can configure it, and a lot of them are pretty good. So what have you been thinking about mono white aggro?
I agree with a lot of things that you said, but it also highlighted a lot of things that I've learned. So I'm excited to share it because I think I cracked it. I think I cracked it good. Right. I had an 85% win rate running the deck. Like really good. So mono white that we are used to in standard is kind of a Voltron deck. It's kind of a go tall deck because you have the dog, you have Life's Bounty, you have Hollow Blade. These things are hard to kill, and you throw on some counters from an Ass Pirate, and you throw on a Sky Maul, and you throw on a Redain to protect it a little, and you win. And it's really effective against decks that are trying to remove your threats, and it can also make like one threat big and strong enough that the decks that are aggro can't deal with it. Right? That's kind of mono white and standard.
Yep, that's kind of the theory.
So you lose the dog, you lose the Hollow Blade, you lose the Luminarch Aspirant. Like suddenly,
we have that one.
Yeah, or sorry, you lose the Seasoned Hollow Blade.
The Seasoned Hollow Blade, yeah.
And suddenly you try to go tall. You try to play Voltron, but you can't protect it. You can throw the Maul on whatever you want. It's going to die to anything. Anything that the opponent has is going to die to. One of the few decks where a power word kill is like, ugh. Oh my God, true. No.
Power word kill is brutal.
Not that. Yeah, your Redains don't live. They just die. They don't interfere with anything. They don't disrupt anything. The best thing you can do is like Spellbinder.
Well, I have some things to say about that.
I mean,
but I'll
not
let
if
you
it
keep
dies.
Going. I mean, not against CGB.deck, that's for sure.
My point is like a good removal spell just destroys it. Like if you're going to play the white deck from last format with a few substitutions here and there.
Totally.
And so the point I'm trying to get to is that mono white isn't the go tall deck anymore. You got to play the go wide deck.
Interesting.
So let me give you the list. Here's my list.
So you've been playing Paladin class?
Yeah, let me give you the list. Let me just run it down.
Lay it on us.
4 Code Spell Cleric.
Oh.
1 white, 1/1. If it is the second spell you cast, put a +1/+1 counter on another creature.
Who would have thought CGB would have stooped so low to putting Code Spell Cleric in his deck? All right,
I've got the freaking results, man. You gotta believe in me. 4 Monk of the Open Hand.
Okay.
4 Paladin class.
Yeah.
2 Portable Hole. 4 copies of Usher of the Fallen. 4 copies of Clarion Spirit. 4 copies of the Ass Pirate. 4 Elite Spellbinders and 4 Skyclave Apparitions. But those are the only 3 drops. No Maul of Skyclaves. No Redains. Then we have 1 Grandmaster of Flowers and 1 Legion Angel, and then 4 Havens, 2 Cave of the Frost Dragon, 18 Snow Plains. It's a go wide deck. It's trying to get everything on the board before the opponent can do much about it. Double spell, multiple turns early, and then you upgrade your Paladin class and you smash. And you're just wider, faster, stronger instead of being taller.
So I think I like the theory of this deck. One of the reasons I'm shaking my head a little bit is that I've been crushing this deck on the ladder. I have not lost to this deck, playing pretty much most of my aggro decks. And one of the issues I've been finding with this deck is that to me it often just feels smaller than what the aggro decks that I've been doing are doing. It's possible that there's a delta between like this deck piloted by Big Brain Mage CGB and this deck piloted by,
known
average
aggro
master. So I believe that you've been having results with this deck, but it's a little bit hard for me to take it fully seriously when this is a deck that I've been just absolutely clowning on the ladder.
But have you been like finding those great results with Redain and Sky Maul? And
I have, and it's maybe partially matchup dependent. So one of the
I've been farming that deck on the ladder like easily.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's really results. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's I know it makes me wonder. So this is what I've found, right? Is that my opponent will like play some Code Spell Clerics or whatever, and then what I've been doing is just stuff like like I'll get like an Aspirant Sky Maul combo, something like that, and I'll just start clocking in the air and usually finish the game fairly easily that way. And then against like a deck like mono green, I often find that like a go wide deck will often just feel a little bit too small ball, and these big trampling threats will just kind of come in and mop up the game. So So one thing that I have noticed is that I think Paladin class is a really great deck, a card, and I think it's a skill testing card, and I think that it's one of the sweetest new additions to the format, and I really like that your deck is taking advantage of that. And I think that this is a card which we are in the process of and will continue to be in the process of figuring out the best play patterns for it.
Okay. Yeah. It's especially nice that it's kind of this thing you can play on one and then level up later so that your clerics and your monks and your clarion spirits pop, because it doesn't have to hit the board and impact it immediately as long as you're getting effects off these other things. Portable Hole is like that too, whereas most decks, if you run Portable Hole and there are no targets for it, it's dead, but here you can just slam it to make your other cards better if you have to. But it's so good in like a tempo-y, when you're both playing double aggro, an aggro mirror, if you have Portable Hole and they don't, it's so good.
Yeah, especially with Clarion Spirit, Monk, all of this other stuff. And I have agreed. I agree with you in the sense that I think Clarion Spirit's one of the best things that you can be doing with mono white in this format. It's just there's good support for it, and it's a powerful creature. And it generates value that a lot of your other white cards aren't doing for you. And you have these nutty turns where you play a bunch of stuff out, you generate a bunch of flyers, and you kind of go to town.
But when I play Clarion Spirit with Sky Maul and with Redain in my deck, I'm never making spirits. Like, how do you do it?
It's true. I make less spirits. I'm sure I make less spirits than you do.
Okay.
Yeah. But I've just, I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you. I think that my mono white list feels like the slightly more mid-rangey version of the deck. And I think that it's kind of that classic color pie thing of like aggro farms control, mid-range farms aggro, control, you know what I mean? And then control farms mid-range. So that's kind of the experience I've been having. I've found myself winning with my mono white list against the smaller white decks or the smaller aggro decks, getting totally punished by control, obviously, because Sky Maul is a terrible card against control. So that's been my experience so far.
Okay. I mean, then I guess it kind of tracks. It just sounds like we care about different matchups.
Yeah, I think that that's very true. And I also think like I'm talking about a relatively small sample size here. So just because I won against a deck X number, like let's say that I've beaten a deck like 5 times yesterday or something like that. It's just a very small sample size, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the matchup was good.
But it might. But it might.
But it might. Anyway, I think, okay, before we move on, there's a couple of cards I want to ask you about in white. How have you found Sparring Regimen?
I cut it. Same principle as the Sky Maul.
I have also found Sparring Regimen to be a little bit too slow and just not quite good enough. And it's also terrible on defense.
Yep, only good on the front foot, unfortunately. You need a pretty large creature to be able to untap and make it good on defense in the way that it would kind of give vigilance, and the creature has to attack to gain the counter, and if it's attacking into an old growth troll and it's not bigger than an old growth troll, it's not gonna go well for you.
Nope. Or an Imrith.
Oh,
that's the thing, like you play that, your opponent drops an Imrith, it's kind of an ouch. So that just a final note, that's one of the reasons I've actually enjoyed playing the Sky Maul, is that like when my opponent taps out for an Imrith, it's one of the few ways I've found to get through one of those. It's also an annoying roadblock against my opponent's Goldspan Dragon. So that's another couple of reasons I've found Sky Maul to be surprisingly good against dragons. Professor of Symbology. Have you been running this in your list?
No.
Yeah, I'm really on the fence about whether it's a good card or not in the format.
One of the few decks I run without Learn at all has been that white list. And I don't know, not enough impact there. I'll take my Code Spell Cleric. I want my double spelling. I need to get wide and get the game over with.
Well, I appreciate this CGB because I think we often agree on this show, and we often kind of decide upon the same versions of a deck, or similar anyway. But I think it's kind of cool that we've got 2 different approaches, and and we've both been kind of smashing the other version with it. So I don't know, crafties, you can try them both and see where you come out.
I'm sticking with my version until people figure out that Orcus is good.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Orcus, fantastic reason to not run mono white in this format. Okay. The next deck that I wanted to talk about is It Dragons? Where do you currently feel like Is It Dragons is positioned in the meta?
Probably tier 1 best of 3, but my God, is it hard? Is it hard to get the right best of 1 version? Like,
yes.
And since there's no best of 3 queue, and some people might question why I would even bother saying that, it's because there are best of 3 tournaments being run on third-party sites like MTG Melee, or Is It Dragons is continuing to show up along with Mono Green, and it often feels like a 2-deck format in those tournaments. But
yeah,
man, like, do you want to beat do you want to beat green? Do you really want to beat green? Do you want to have a game against white? Are you going to run cards like Draconic Intervention and Crush the Weak to give yourself a spot in those? Or do you want to win the mirrors? Do you want to beat any other deck with Alrund's Epiphany in it? Because you're going to need probably more than Foresaw It Comings. You're going to need like Negates and Disdainful Strokes, which would make a ton of sense in Standard because of Emergent Ultimatum, and make very little sense in a best of 1 queue where you might come up against somebody who does not care about those cards in the slightest. It's a very polarizing deck, in my opinion. Is It Dragons? So what have you figured out?
Yeah, I have agreed. It was actually one of the things I was struggling with. I was thinking about revisiting the deck, and I was just really struggling to think of the optimal build, because there are definitely games on the ladder like where I'm playing aggro against the Dragons list, and in the first 4 turns of the game, they play like 2 Dragon's Fire, 2 Frostbite while advancing their board. And then they go Goldspan into Alrund's Epiphany. And it's like the God deck. It's like, oh my God, how would any creature deck ever beat this deck? Ever. You just get crushed. And then, in other games, I'm mono green, and I play Ranger class on turn 2 on the play, and I've run them over by turn 4, and how could they ever possibly win against me? And it just feels laughable.
Yeah.
So I totally agree. It's really tough, and I think one of the issues with Is It Dragons is that it has excellent answers to everything in the format, but you just can't, just like you said, best of 3 really makes that possible, and best of 1, it's really hard. And one of the issues is that the deck runs a lot of cards that you have to keep in, right? So you pretty much have to have 4 Goldspan Dragons. You have to have 4 Alrund's Epiphanies. That's the best thing to be doing at the top end of your deck. But then when you get through your Prismari commands and your Saw It Comings and your card draw spells and your expressive iterations and stuff, it's like 80 cards. It's almost like we just want this to be a Yorion deck. Let's go. And it could just be like what am I seeing a lot of on the ladder today, and just adjust from there.
Yeah, that's why I said in my Is It Dragons video, was like, you have to be willing to play for an hour and then adjust your flex spots to what you expect to queue into, because this is also a place where, in a very bizarre way, I miss companion information. I can't tell you how many times in this format I click the view battlefield and look for a companion to help me decide if my hand is good, and it's not there, man. They're not there. Nope. And it's like, okay, look at your hand, and you're like, if I play against aggro, I have a shot, and if I play against mid-range or control, I'm going to get demolished, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. And then you just kind of look at your metagame statistics and the fact that aggro always trends up, and you try to keep a hand that's good against aggro, and then you end up in these games that never feel like games because you just have the wrong cards for the situation at every turn. And that's a best of 1 problem that it existed a long time ago, and adventures they ruined a lot of things, but they did make the best of 1 queue feel more interactive, because you just didn't have these cards that were totally dead in every matchup. They were always at least a creature. It's hard to find the same thing in 2021. There are just bad matchups, and there aren't enough cards to fill all your slots in your deck.
Absolutely. That's a really, really excellent point. I think Brazen Borrower is a perfect example of a card that's extremely strong in the Is It Dragons list ordinarily. Because it pressures your opponent's planeswalkers, it puts a threat on the battlefield against a control opponent, makes them have to kind of pace their turns awkwardly and maybe spend mana to kill it, and then you're up in the counter spell exchange, stuff like that. So yeah, we don't have that kind of versatility, and it's rough, man. It's rough. So, but at the same time, so I think of the Is It Dragons as it's a list that can beat anyone on the right game and the right matchup. I would love to see the consistency numbers on it, because I could see it being anywhere from like a 40 to a 60% deck.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I would guess hover right around in the middle, man, because
yeah,
but it's still strong. But I think what's fun about it is it's kind of the mid-range deck of the format. And that those aren't usually good in best of one, but it has the power to stay there. So it's kind of this deck that makes your control decks harder to build. If you want to transition into control, it's like we are not going to beat in control decks are not going to beat Is It Dragons if they're just leaning on like 2 or 3 Saw It Comings and they don't have any other counter spells. But if they run a bunch of counter spells, they're never going to beat mono white and mono green. The counter spells are unplayable against those decks, like unplayable.
Well, this is one of the comments I wanted to make before I turn it over to you, and maybe this will segue us into the decks that you want to be talking about. But one of the most polarized cards I've been thinking about in this matchup is Saw It Coming.
Yeah,
right. Because in some matchups, it's one of the best cards in your deck, and in other matchups, like against aggro, it is beyond unplayable. So what I don't know, like, have you been running the full 4 of these in your control decks?
Almost always, unless I have other ways that I feel like I'm doing something good against the Is It Dragon deck. I almost always have to have 4 of them, but I've been down to 2 because maybe my deck also has Soul Shatter and has some dragons of its own to try to get in the way. But yeah, I pretty much come back to I still need like around 4 counters. I can't be the blue deck with less counter spells in those matchups because you just get farmed. So I haven't found a good way around that. There aren't a lot of uncounterable cards in the format. Coma is not an easy card to put into your decks. It's very difficult. So it's tough. It's tough to find that balance. And then when you draw 2 Saw It Comings and you turn out to be against mono white and all their cards are 1-drops, and then you're like, okay, I hold up 3 mana, and they're like, activate my paladin class.
Yeah,
it's so bad.
Yep,
it's so bad. It's
rough. You know what I just realized, CGB?
What?
So Coma's been like kind of a finisher against control for a while, right?
Yeah.
You know what Coma sucks at attacking into? Is a freaking Hall of the Blue Giant land. 7/7?
It's okay.
What do you think?
They can usually tap it down and pay the ward. Because if they
I guess they can
Coma,
pay the ward with a serpent, something like that. Yeah.
And not only that, it takes 8 freaking mana or 7 mana, right, for the blue player to make that play, and they're tapped out, and there's still more. It's just like Coma can sacrifice the serpent it made to just go indestructible, and then use their 7 mana to play something else with the control mage completely tapped out. So I don't think that really. So maybe
it's fine. Yeah, maybe it's fine. I feel like usually you'll drop Coma as like the last card in your hand. It's kind of like your. All right, let's see if this finishes the game. Anyway, that's an interaction I'd like to play with more, because I have been playing a Coma deck just recently, and
thought you weren't into the Coma. Thought you didn't like the Coma.
I mean, hey, when every threat in the format sucks, Coma, let's go.
Arjuna is on the snake train.
So Kovac Blue, I want to hear about your experiences playing Control. And I also want to ask about, so we recently had a tournament in this format that was actually taken down by a Dimir Control deck. And I wonder if you followed those developments, tried the list. I'm sure that you have played a list which is at least rather similar to the list that this person was playing. Okay, so CGB, a deck list that I saw recently took down an Insight esports tournament in this particular format was a Dimir control list run by Tian Famoon. I'm sorry if I pronounced that name wrong. And so this was a Dimir control list running, a lot of the usual suspects. It's got some Mordenkainens, it's got a Professor Onyx, it's running 3 Crippling Fear and 2 Shadows Verdict. It's also running 2 Blood on the Snow. So that's a total of 7 sweepers. And then in the instant suite, it's just kind of running a lot of counter magic, card draw, removal, a lot of the cards that you would expect to see in a list like this. Notably, it's running 2 Divide by 0, so doing some learning there. And of course, it is a snow deck, so it's running some copies of Graven Lore. But I'm curious if you have messed around with a deck which looks something like this. I kind of assume that you have, playing around with Dimir, and I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on how Dimir is positioned in Control and whether it's the best version of Control that you've found.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy to say that most of what I did led me to a similar spot. The biggest thing, I think I would have given up on Control 100%, just been off it. I'm a mono green gamer now, If it weren't for one fact, if you're not playing black, it's really hard to kill Planeswalkers.
Yes.
It is not easy to remove a 6-mana Planeswalker, which means, like, for the first time in what I feel like forever, you can cast these really expensive Planeswalkers and they actually stay on the battlefield for like 2 or 3 turns. Or I've seen a Mordenkainen stay on the battlefield and get up to 17 loyalty.
Brutal.
I was watching a game where that happened today on Twitch, and it was like, wow. But yeah, Planeswalkers sit on the battlefield for a good amount of time in this format. They're not easy to just reach out and kill. The haste and the creature land threats are good, and they'll go out there and hurt them, but they don't often swing over and kill them because Onyx and Mordenkainen get up to 7 loyalty. Onyx is 6, but Mordenkainen gets up to 7 loyalty.
7.
And they often, take a punch and still get to do something the next turn. So my Dimir decks especially are focused on Planeswalkers landing, and it's usually exactly the same layout, 2 Mordenkainen and 1 Onyx, and just getting those to grind the opponent into dust. And this list is a lot of what I look for. The Graven Lores and the Blood on the Snows, taking advantage of kind of a snow theme, are things I haven't gotten into. I found those to be really slow, and that might be the difference in best of 1 and best of 3. I wouldn't be surprised if that makes 100% sense for best of 3 and not for best of 1. In best of 1, I'm playing Alrund's Epiphany, which also seems really slow, but here's the play pattern I'm always trying to set up every game. Alrund's Epiphany, make 2 birds, then drop my 6-drop Planeswalker, and plus, hopefully. Like, just having the 2 birds to chump for it usually works, gets you through the turn so that you can untap the next turn. Now you saw it coming as defending something useful, and you just try to ride that Planeswalker to victory. And it's a style of Magic that I feel like hasn't been around in a while, where you can defend the queen, so to speak, and it actually works. So that's what I'm still loving about Control decks.
Let's go into that a little bit more, because I had honestly pronounced Control dead in this format until I saw these Dimir Control lists running Alrund's Epiphany. That is actually what turned me around on it, because the play patterns with Alrund's Epiphany was so strong. I think that it seems really unintuitive, right? Like, I think that if you were building a Dimir Control list in regular standard right now, it would seem really odd to be running Alrund's Epiphany and especially multiple copies of it in a lot of these lists. So what is it? Why are we choosing to run a card like Alrund's Epiphany in lists like this? I mean, it's good for that scenario that you outlined, but it's also good in a lot of other spots. And I'm hoping you can take us through some of that.
Well, I am questioning it a little because this list that you sent me doesn't have it.
Sure.
So I'm thinking about it a bit more, but I mean, it is mostly the fact that when you have a planeswalker, you either need to play this first and use the birds to defend it, or play it after the planeswalker and get to kind of end the game. Now, I also talked about Mordenkainen on 17 loyalty that I saw, and you can just plus it forever. But there is this tension with that card where the minus, if you're low on cards, might deck you, or the ultimate, you know what I mean? So you kind of avoid using it. If you have Alrund's Epiphany in your deck, though, and you know you're drawing into an extra turn and some power and toughness, you can kind of do the mental math of, all right, I'm going to draw my deck. My hand is going back. I'm going to draw my deck. So if I draw my library, play an Alrund's Epiphany, and I'm going to draw like 2 or 3 more Epiphanies, so I'm going to have X many turns in a row. What other threats do I have in my deck that I can play that can then turn sideways? Can I end the game if I take the next 4 turns in a row? And it's really fun because somewhere in there you're powering up Hall of the Storm Giants. Maybe it's on the last turn. Maybe you have enough mana to do it earlier than that. Sometimes I'm like, man, my version has the pest card. Now I'm gonna miss Hunt for Specimens. My version has
specimens.
Hunt for Specimens.
I thought that was a cool include.
Yeah. And so I'm like, does the 1/1 pest attacking over 3 turns in a row combined with the birds get me there, right? Or will I have a chance to play my Professor Onyx, and do I have these cheap spells I can cast to finish the job by triggering Magecraft? So it's really complicated, but often if you have a 3-card hand and that becomes your library, but you're taking the next 2 or 3 turns with Epiphanies, you can win the game. And don't forget, you can also, if you have enough loyalty, like minus the Mordenkainen, make the dog, and the dog becomes the size of your hand size, which is pretty hype.
That's pretty awesome. A few other things I've noticed. Okay, so one of the coolest things about Alrund's Epiphany, and one of the kind of underappreciated aspects of the card, is that it can just really smooth out certain curves that you have, and it can really smooth out certain game plans. So, for example, I think you'll get in these spots where, let's say you have an Imarith in your hand, but you don't want to just drop it unprotected on the battlefield, right? And so you can have these curves where you foretell an Epiphany earlier in the game. Maybe you've also foretell a Saw It Coming, and then on turn 6 you play Alrund's Epiphany, and then into a turn 7 Imarith with counterspell backup. So now you have 2 birds and an Imarith and a counterspell, and it's going to be really hard for your opponent to like gotcha in that situation.
I agree with that. I've also though, like I've gotten past the point where I play Imarith now. Like,
okay, so you're just off it.
So that card was amazing. Like, we were high on it last week. I love that card. It feels like the format figured out what to do about that card quick. Like you know what I mean? The mono white and the mono green decks just have ways to punish you and just seemingly end the game when you drop an Imarith. The mid-range decks all have ways to kill it. You just get into these binds. So yeah, I'm down to no Imariths on my Demirs and just focusing on the Planeswalker plan. But that was just something I wanted to throw in there.
No, that's super legit. I think another cool thing you can do, right, is you can play your Epiphany on 7, and then you go into your 8 mana turn where you drop a Planeswalker and leave up interaction, right?
Yeah.
Which is a similar kind of a thing.
Yep.
And then that's the perfect curve, right? Because again, you have a Planeswalker which can defend itself. You have 2 birds and you have an interaction spell. It's kind of like exactly where you want to be as a control player, right?
Yep, that's a good one. And the Imarith plan was a nice plan, and it also combined very well with Epiphany until everybody seemed to figure out what to do about Imarith. And now it's just like, well, instead we'll go make it like the 8 mana turn and play. And I want to say that Hunt for Specimens, I've run as many as like 3 environmental sciences in my sideboard to make it so that hitting land number 8 untapped is actually a doable thing. But Hunt for Specimens is not bad. I am running no Behold the Multiverses because I found like the format so aggressive, and just taking turns off to cast Behold the Multiverse, I felt like I was just dead all the time. I felt like I had no time for that. But playing like Hunt for Specimens and getting to chump, or just having this pest around to block for your Planeswalker later, and also being able to go to the sideboard, make sure you get a little life back and hit your land drops, that was getting the job done for me.
Yeah, well, and what I like that you're highlighting there is that drawing random cards from your deck can sometimes be pretty bad. But the nice thing about these learn cards is that you cast them knowing exactly what you will draw with them. And so, exactly, they get you land drops in the early game. They get you things like mascot exhibitions in the late game. They kind of take care of you. And so they just give you a lot of agency about how to sculpt your curve and how to plan out your next couple of turns. So I think that's really a smart include. And I also just like how much life you're gaining, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like with your pests and your environmental sciences and stuff, you're probably gaining like 5 to 7 life, maybe even more over the course of a long game.
Yeah, and I also think, much like protecting planeswalkers and plussing them is a forgotten strategy, so is just chump blocking. We hit on this before, I think last week, but chump blocking is very back on the menu in a way that Questing Beast and Embercleave didn't allow for a very long time. And just having a 1/1, like I'll take a lot of damage from my opponent to keep my 1/1 around so that when I do drop my Planeswalker, they can't just swing over and kill it. I've got something to throw under the bus.
Yep, absolutely. I totally agree, man. I think it's one of the reasons that Trample is so good in the format right now. I think it's another reason why Mono Green's good is because it runs these big trampling creatures. But yeah, I think this is kind of the typical thing, right? Is if you drop a Planeswalker, activate it, you can chump block to protect it the following turn, and then you untap and activate it again. It's like your chances of winning that game just went up by like many percentage points, right? So
oh yeah, you're doing it.
Yep, it's often worth just throwing away your entire board to untap with that Planeswalker and just kind of go off from there.
Oh, when you're plussing Mordenkainen or Professor Onyx and finding more Allrun's Epiphanies, you understand the appeal of Epiphany in those decks. Yeah,
you are doing it. So let's just talk quickly about the removal suite. I'd be interested to hear like what you're enjoying, what you're not enjoying. A lot of people have been running Poison the Cup lately. How do you feel about this spell?
I'm on 2 Poison the Cups and I hate it.
Okay, so you don't like it.
I don't like it, but I'm not sure I can do better.
Okay.
You've got to be able to kill the creature lands. It's really hard to do. The list that you shared with me has 4 flunks, 3 Poison the Cups, 2 masteries. Like Baleful Mastery, I'm way off that. I don't want to pay 4 mana to exile anything, and I don't want to pay a student cost and give my opponent a card either. I've broken up with Baleful Mastery in a pretty big way.
Okay.
The list you sent me has no Soul Shatters. I'm still running about 2. I think it's overrated, but I think it's good.
Okay. So you're not doing like the full 4 because some people have gone hard on Soul Shatter.
Oh yeah, there are people in love with this because it's good against Goldspan, like really good against Goldspan and Coma, right?
Yep. And opponents' Planeswalkers sometimes.
Not terrible there, but like those aren't the decks to beat. Those are the decks that are on the fringe. Like Mono Green really likes it when you're like running Soul Shatter. You know, they love that.
I love it.
So I think that card is really overrated, and I'm on 2, and I think it's a good number. I'm on 1 flunk. I found that card.
Okay, you're off it.
I'm on 1. Like I think sometimes you got to get that Toski, but. I found it so easy for my opponents to keep their hands full, with learn cards and with Ranger class chapter 4. And I'm not always killing what I need to kill with a flunk. I'm missing way too much and I hate it. But I'm also on 1 copy, and this is a card that people are running none of. I'm on like 1 power word kill because I can usually find a target for it, and I usually need something at that curve.
1 should be fine, I think.
I also have found. So land drops, I have run 28, 29, 30 potential lands. I've run a lot of Jwari Disruptions and a few Hagra Maulings in my decks, and I'm still like worried because missing a land drop just feels like death if you're not running Behold the Multiverse, and I'm not.
Yeah.
So I'm running I'm doing a lot of this thing where I will foretell a Poison the Cup, The opponent will play the creature I want to poison, and I'll put a stop on my upkeep, and I'll poison it on my upkeep and scry for the land drop that turn. And it feels janky and lame and weird, but it's getting the job done. So I don't know.
So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, right? Because I feel like a lot of your classic archetypes got, you know, pretty playable cards and have previously pretty playable cards that kind of are role players in the deck. They kind of check the boxes they need to.
Yeah.
And I've been feeling like some of these control cards are just really weak, or they're just really a little bit too conditional, right?
Oh man. Oh, it's really bad. Blue-white, like playing blue-white was, you just don't have answers to anything. And I'm like running 4 dragon turtles. Just lock them down with the turtle. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like, it makes us realize how spoiled we've been with Heartless Act and Eliminate in the regular standard format. Like, talk about some playable freaking Magic cards, right?
Vanishing Verse. Now that's a good pivot. Vanishing Verse is what's left of that. Just the 2 mana get it all removal spell, and it is so good. But it is so hard to run those 3 colored decks. So I've seen a lot of black-white decks that are like, they're kind of the next thing I'm excited to explore because they look good. So you can run like black-white treasures with Deadly Visit and like Shambling Ghast and things like that, and then still play Vanishing Verse. And then you play Kaya with Deadly Visit, which is, you know, the draw 2, make a treasure. And the Kaya puts the ghost form counter on whatever you're killing, and then it comes back.
Oh, right. So talk about that spell, because I've actually been really impressed with that spell. It's 1 and a black, instant, sacrifice a creature or artifacts, draw 2, make a treasure. Is that what it is?
Yeah. So I was 100% off Deadly Visit when I tried playing it in like a low curve traditional Rakdos. And then I got back in. I was like all the way back in. The second somebody played Shambling Ghast turn 1, Deadly Visit turn 2, Goldspan Dragon turn 3.
Nasty, dude.
Like, because you make the treasure with the Shambling Ghast and you get the treasure for the visit. So you just have 5 mana on turn 3 in your black-red deck. Like, and I was like, okay, I'm back. So
brutal.
Yeah, the Deadly Visit requires, first of all, it's not like building traditional mana curves. You play these 1-drops like Eye Twitch and Shambling Ghast, and then you play the Deadly Visit, and then there's just this big hole in your mana curve where you don't even want 3-drops and you only want a few 4-drops. You just want to be like playing big expensive cards, Goldspan Dragon, and then you want to play things on top of that. This is where Valky into Tibble is really good because you can play it early or late.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
and I assume you're rocking Orcus as well.
That's the card I was getting to.
Yeah.
That card is aggro farming machine. Orcus is so good, and I think it's underplayed right now. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that people cling to control. It's not great against Saw It Coming. It's okay as long as you're not like banking on it. That card though, man, when you're actually hitting your land drops and making treasures at the same time, which is what a Deadly Visit kind of deck when it's built well does, that card is a heck of a top deck. The last game I played before recording this podcast was I'm dead on board, but I top decked the Orcus and it brings back a Ooze, a gelatinous cube, and a Valky, and those gain haste and remove my opponent's blocker and swing for lethal. Like
epic.
Boom. It was the top deck that you live for. So I'm riding an Orcus high at the moment, which might color my opinion. But I nobody's played it against me. Don't see it at all. And I played Orcus for like 7 on turn like 5 and just swept Mono White's 14 creatures or whatever they had. Okay, it was more like 8 creatures. They give and they just scoop on the spot, and I'm like, this is nuts. Like this is quality.
So yeah, if people figure out the optimal Orcus lists, and they will at some point. And if it becomes popular, I think it will basically just eliminate Mono White from the field. Yeah, because you can never beat that card.
And this is why when you originally said it's a very fast format, I think that we're doing this thing that's left over from the previous format where kind of mid-range is unplayable because of Sultai Ultimatum. You just can never beat that in a million years. So we're doing this thing where it's like, all right, we're going to play the intense aggro decks, and they're good, especially while mana bases suck. Like, they're really good. But people are going to figure out the mana bases and what works. They're going to figure out Orcus. They might figure out this black-white deck I'm talking about. Angels is... Black-White Angels we could talk about is surprisingly
it's
good.
pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
And people are going to figure out that mid-range is playable, because it's not like a slam dunk that Control wins those matchups, or that Is It Dragons wins those matchups. They're favored, but it's not easy mode. And I think that we're going to slow this format down a little. I think aggro is going to remain popular, but I don't think it's going to be kind of the polarized format we've had for so long, where there are so many decks that are completely unexplorable because of Emergent Ultimatum. People are saying that Goldspan Dragon into Epiphany is that, but it's not. It's different. If the dragon dies, they're just Epiphany for birds. Epiphany for birds is not broken. It's just tilting. You can handle a tilt. Win the freaking game.
Yeah, I mean, think about like, how likely are you to win a game if someone resolves an Emergent Ultimatum against you? You're like 20% at best, right?
20%, man, you are a master.
I mean, it's like I've beaten it, right? But it was only because I had like sometimes your opponent resolves their ultimatum and then you do yours on your turn, and
yeah,
like,
okay, you're playing ultimatum against okay, that come on now. But, now it cancels out because you resolved an ultimatum that game, so it was actually your opponent that was 0%.
Yeah,
see, it doesn't work.
No, you're right. It's like it's just a game winner like 9 times out of 10 or whatever. So yeah, exactly. And there's just nothing like that in this format. So yep, we gotta be a little more crafty, as it were. We gotta build our game plans and really find our wins. It's such an interesting format because I half agree with you that I think that there is playable mid-range and more control-y and kind of go over the top plans like Orcus plans. But then there are just a lot of decks that are like turn 3 Goldspan Dragon, deal with me, bro. You know? And then there are these other, like mono green curves that are just totally face smashing. So I'll be really interested to see where it settles down. I've definitely, like, for example, just playing like Showdown of the Skalds. That's a card where like I've been asking myself, is this card too slow for this format? Which is kind of ludicrous, right?
Have you seen the one that? Have you seen the Goblin Showdown deck that won a tournament?
I haven't seen the Goblin Showdown deck. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's Goblin Tribal with white off the Snarls and the Pathways, and usually maybe 1 planes, but usually Snarls Pathways. And it plays 4 Showdown the Skalds and some amount of Rally the Ranks. The 2-mana Anthem for name a creature type, and they get +1/+1. So it has an absurd amount of ways to pump the goblins, and it has this awesome card advantage. Showdown the Skalds exactly where you want it, in a very aggressive leaning deck as the reload or the punish for them tapping out to deal with your board. And that deck won a tournament. That deck beat the mono greens. It got there.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. And I mean, with Rally being the perfect hit, that's like the card you want to hit off of your Showdown, right? So
solid.
Yep. It's pretty good. You're like buffing the team and then putting extra counters on them. Sounds good to me. So I mean, I think that's it. It's like there are a lot of powerful cards in the format. We need to find like which decks they go into, whether they're fast enough, etc. But I do think, to put a cherry on the Rakdos thing, I do think that there is like a black-red X treasure deck in the format. I think the X is it's the X factor. I'm not really sure like what the best splash is, but I feel like I keep saying this, but I really do think that at some point we're going to figure out what that best treasure deck is, and it's going to be really good. But there are just so many different versions. There's Mardu. A lot of people have been enjoying playing Mardu versions running Extus, because I'll tell you what feels really brutal is like dark Avatar on turn 3. Yeah, that's brutal.
There's not a lot of ways to kill it. I mean, Portable Hole isn't as popular as I think many of us expected. So
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that thing clocks you a couple of times and it just ends the game real quick. And especially if you're playing like a creature deck, like a mono white deck, right? You can't just like drop. Yeah, it's only portable hull. You can't just like drop an apparition, right?
Nope, doesn't do
in
it.
mono green, you probably just you're not going to get your big creatures out in time to do your fight things. So I mean, that's just a solid way you can kind of win the game on turn 3, kind of a thing.
Oh yeah, and
so
it sure makes Goldspan Dragon look bad if they can't counter it because they have to sacrifice their dragon. It's probably their only creature, and then you're getting in there.
Yep. So I think that Extus, that's a card. Extus with the avatar on the back, is an unexplored and very, very powerful card. And when you want your creatures to be dying anyway, I mean, that's the brutal thing, right? Is that like you could do a curve that was something like Avatar on turn 3 into Goldspan on turn 4. Like you can do that kind of stuff in this format, and it's freaking brutal.
It is. It's fun. I like it.
Yeah. So a lot of unexplored territory there. I think that that's one of the archetypes which it just has. There are a lot of different cards, a lot of different things you can try. Some people have been going Jund because of the Innkeeper. So I don't know, man. That's one of the things I'm most looking forward to is people figuring that one out.
What do you want to dive into most next?
Okay, I started to think about ramp, like, because let's be real. Like at heart, I'm an unabashed freaking Simic mage, right? And I'm just like, I'm always, if there's something stupid and rampy to do in a format, I'm always going to try it. And I recently discovered a list. It was posted by MTG Joe. Shout out to content creator MTG Joe, who made a post on Twitter with a Simic ramp list. And I'll read it off. It's just not that long of a list. So it's got 4 Neverwinter Dryad. This is the 1 green mana 1/1, where you pay 2 and sacrifice it, and you search your library for a forest, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. All right. Yep. Limited fodder, right? It's also running 4 of the Prosperous Innkeeper. It's running a bunch of copies of Into the Royal and Divide by 0. It's running 4 Eureka Moments, 4 Quandrix Cultivator. All right. None of this seems that good, right? This is all like, I'm getting beaten down, right? I'm going to lose the game, which is how it feels. Okay. But then this is what happens. All right. This deck runs 4 copies of Alrund's Epiphany, and it runs 4 Cyclone Summoners. And I have been like, it doesn't seem that good, right? I was playing this before our episode like recording, and I was demolishing aggro decks, dude. This deck like I was freaking embarrassing mono green. I was embarrassing these white decks. I was playing against these red decks, and it was an utter trouncing, because what you do in the late game with this deck is that you'll like drop a Cyclone Summoner, bounce your opponent's board, say go. They'll replay a couple of things. You'll drop another Cyclone Summoner, bounce the rest of their board, swing for 7. Next turn, you Alrund's Epiphany, and it just goes on from there. The deck runs 2 Coma Cosmos Serpents.
Okay. And you said 4 Into the Royals and 4 Divide by Zeros?
Yes.
So you are bouncing and replaying your Cyclone Summoner all the time.
If you want to.
It's just
if
Ugin.
You want to. Yep. So anyway, the deck seems super janky. I haven't played enough with it to really decide whether it's like actually good. It's probably awful against control, but I was trivializing. It felt so good, man. I was just trivializing all of these aggro decks. This deck is better. It's better than it looks. So anyway, I'm going to include a link. What's that?
It sounds delightful.
It's such a good time, man.
Okay.
You should just fire it up and try it out. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. This is the kind of deck where like you stabilize it for life and then you just crush your opponent.
Beautiful.
So that's, I want to explore a little bit more with ramp, because we do have some fairly good ramp options in the format. Prosperous Innkeeper is great. Eureka Moment is a card that could be good. Quandrix Cultivator, another card that could be good. Quandrix Cultivator is really good with it, like in a deck with Into the Royal, for example, because no, you don't want to be casting Into the Royal for 2 mana if you can help it. But like in a mono green matchup, for example, you'll drop a cultivator, they'll try to blizzard brawl it, and then you'll bounce that creature and you'll get your card advantage. So cultivator into cheap interaction, I think is pretty solid. I don't know. And then Coma, I mean, I never thought that I'd be the one to advocate the Cosmos Serpent, but I mean, you know, other mages on this podcast have unironically played Coma the Cosmos Serpent. It's a powerful Magic card. So
nice to have you on the snake train. Welcome to the Coma coil.
Yeah, I may have finally found my Coma deck. So that's been really, really fun. So yeah, shout out to MTG Joe. However competitive this deck ends up being, it has been an absolute blast to play. So I'm going to be experimenting more with just other ramp shells to see if we can't just find like a really backbreaking top end to be moving into quickly. What about you?
There are 3 black-white treasure decks that look, or there are 3 different kinds of black-white decks that look interesting to me. Kind of treasure mid-range control, clerics, which I keep running into, and I can see the potential, but I think some of the card choices are weird, so I might explore that a little bit more. And I think that angels are potentially very good and might actually be pretty fun.
Let's talk about angels for a moment. I've seen it on the ladder. It definitely has potential. There are a number of cards in the list which are non-negotiable, right? Of course, you're running 4 of the Youthful Valkyrie. You're running 4 of the 2/4. What's that one that pumps the team?
Righteous Valkyrie.
Yep. So you're running the full Valkyrie package. You're probably running some number of Furia's Retribution.
Yep.
It's a playable card in the deck. And another card which I've actually found really backbreaking, especially in this lower powered format, is the it's the 5-mana Valkyries enchantment that makes a token.
Rampage of the Valkyries.
So Rampage of the Valkyries, okay, your opponent plays one of these, sucks, but it's not the end of the world. When your opponent drops the second one in a creature matchup, you can never, ever, ever, ever win. I had a game, I was playing my Naya deck, and I had a really brutal board presence, dude. I had like 2 Goldspan Dragons, and I also had 2 of the Aspirants, the Ass Pirates.
Yeah.
And at one point on my board, I had an 11/11 Goldspan and a 9/9 Goldspan, and my opponent drops the second Valkyrie's enchantment, and I look at my board, I look at their board, and I was like, I will never, ever, ever win this game. Ever. Like every creature of theirs, like if I trade, I lose 3 creatures. If I removal spell one of their creatures, I lose 2 creatures. There's no way.
Yeah. Ouch.
So
Ouchie.
it's a surprisingly powerful late game for a creature deck. Not great against control necessarily, but I don't know. Is there anything out of these angels lists that you want to highlight, or like maybe an angle on it that you've thought was particularly successful?
I just want to say that the last time we checked into angels in standard, like a 4/4 for 4 with vigilance, like unplayable. Can't block a Love Struck Beast, gets Brazen Borrowed, just a joke. Like angels were completely unplayable against the meta. And in this meta, like nothing kills them. Frostbite, haha. You know?
Yeah, that 4 toughness, man.
Yeah, man.
It's so brutal.
All of a sudden, a 4/4 flying vigilance is a pain because Goldspan can't attack through it without help. Frostbite doesn't kill it. Blizzard Brawl is good against them still if they have a creature that it works with. But when you play black-white, you get to run good removal. You get to run Portable Hole if you want it, Skyclave Apparition, and the best probably 2-mana removal spell in the format, Vanishing Verse. So you can blow up a Blizzard Brawl if you time things well. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of potential there because the angel tokens are back on the menu, whereas before Starnheim Unleashed was kind of a meme card. You can just straight up cast that on turn 4 here and often make a battlefield presence that's really difficult for the opponent to deal with.
Yep. And then, of course, if we do end up getting a best of 3 queue, which a lot of people have been clamoring for, you also get access to like one of the best discard spells in the format in Humiliate. Could improve the matchup against control a little bit.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I think that this is a deck with legs. I have found it to be a little weak to like some of the better like mono green or mono white aggro starts. If you can kind of get under him, get your removal spells and your apparitions lined up right, you can sometimes kind of gank him out. But I feel like if you get to the mid game, this Angels deck can usually crush most other creature builds, and it gains a lot of life. Gains a lot of life.
Valkyrie Starnheim Unleashed, anyone?
Ugh, brutal.
You don't like that.
So
you don't like
yeah,
that.
Angels has a strong pedigree in historic, and it's not a joke. So yeah, we'll see if it also gets some additional support in the upcoming sets as well. A card I wanted to point out, I kind of hinted at it earlier, but Hofry Ghostforge. Okay, I played against this a surprising amount on my stream last night. This card got me a few times. It got me so hard. So I'm going to read this card for you again. This is like a card that no one's paid attention to because it's not remotely playable in regular standard. So Hofry Ghostforge, 3 red white, mythic legendary creature dwarf cleric. It's a 4/5, which is basically unkillable in this format. Spirits you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types, and it has, when this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to your graveyard. Okay, so Hofry Ghostforge does a surprisingly good impression of what was that card? A Reaper of Night. A two black 4/4 flyer. When a creature dies, you exile it, make a token copy. That's
Nightmare
a 1/1.
Shepherd?
Nightmare Shepherd. Yeah. Okay. So this is like Nightmare Shepherd plus. So what you do is you play this in a deck with cards like Skyclave Apparition. There are a surprising number of spirits in the format. And I played against a Mardu version of this deck, and they were playing that it's a cleric. It's a 3/1, and when it enters the battlefield, you sacrifice a creature, and your opponent has to sacrifice a creature.
Demon's Disciple?
I think that's the one. So the combo was they play that with Hofry out. I sack a creature. They sack the Disciple. It comes back. I have to sack another creature. And I got completely demolished by this. And they were also playing Skyclave Apparition. And like I couldn't attack into it. It's like if they block with their apparition, they just get another thing. So anyway,
have you ever tried removing the threat?
Hey, I play mono white, man.
Mono white's got a removal problem. It's true. That's why I'm saying you got to go wide and get them dead.
Yeah. So I think cards like Hofry highlight the fact that removal is really not that great in this format. So sometimes you can just like you get down a kind of a meme card like Hofry, and if your opponent can't deal with it for a turn, it just freaking goes off on you.
Oh, I see. You mean the removal options available aren't great?
Yes.
Yeah. I buy that. Yep. They all have weaknesses.
It's just really hard to like come up with. And it's also just hard to get them consistently hitting in every different deck, right?
I don't know, man. Hofry can't be vanishing first. Might be the truth.
There you go. You know, we don't have... there's just a lot of cards that we're missing in this current standard format. And so you can just randomly lose to a card like this. Anyway, I just wanted to point it out because I saw some pretty sweet decks built around it.
Sign of a good format, I think, when you randomly lose to the Mythic. That was unplayable a month ago.
That's what I'm saying, man. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I like it.
You know, go forth and have fun.
Mm-hmm.
All right, man. Well, I'm sure that we could talk about this format until the end of time, but it's probably about time to wrap it up and keep moving along. So here's what I want to ask you, Covert Go Blue, is so you're going to be experimenting with these black-white decks. If you wanted to win a tournament, like this weekend,
okay,
what would you be sleeving up?
Green.
I probably would too.
I haven't lost a game playing green. Not one.
It's brutal.
Yeah. I stopped just because I'm like, I'll get too used to this.
I stopped because I just got bored. I got bored of winning, you know?
It's a good feeling. But we'll be back when winning it becomes a little more scarce, chasing that Hofry ghost forge adrenaline rush.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, that's it, crafties. If you want to hit mythic and hit numbered mythic and just keep winning, play mono green, look at CGB's list, look at my list, come up with some version of it that you like, and it'll probably be good and you'll do a lot of winning. All right. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. You can find us on all the usual places. If you're an audio listener, you can watch the video version on Covert Go Blue's YouTube channel. If you're a video viewer who sometimes wants to take us on the road with you, or when you're doing the chores or whatever, you can listen to us on Spotify and just about any podcatcher that you might have out there. Also, just wanted to highlight that we have a Patreon account. And Patreon is an excellent way that you can help keep the lights on and help keep us motivated to do this podcast. It does matter. You know, we look at the finances at the end of the month and it influences our decisions. So if you're feeling a little extra generous, or maybe you're a Nigerian prince, or maybe you just came into a massive inheritance or something like that, just, consider stopping by and dropping a couple bucks a month. You can start for as little as the price of coffee a month to support us. Pretty reasonable. Lastly, I wanted to give a shout out to our Discord. We've had a bunch of people joining over the last week. And so I just wanted to welcome all of you new Discorders. Yes, we have a Discord for the podcast. It's more people joining every day, people talking about deck lists, people discussing things that we mentioned on the show. We have a number of really engaged community members who are just kind of waiting around to listen to your sometimes silly questions and give you reasonable answers. So go bug them. So in the meantime, stay courageous and stay lost, my friends. And until next time, I will see you later, CGB.
Later, crafties.